everyone, and welcome to our post-game interview updates. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. Our show is brought to you by the U.S. Army Warrior Fitness Team, which provides awareness of Army opportunities while serving. Team members are active duty soldiers that compete in CrossFit, strongman, and strongwoman competitions, both nationally and internationally. Make sure to check out our link in our bio for more info. On today's show, we're catching up with one of the men who brings the CrossFit Games to you, Mike Roth with HRP Live. Have you taken some time off yet?
Yeah, I honestly took the week after games to try to kind of, recover, sleep a little bit. And now, we're in the reconciliation period, so just making sure everybody gets paid. And, so it's, I always say games is like that program in the background that's always running on your computer. Like it never really goes away. It never really ends. So, but I did get some sleep. I got back to the gym, which was nice because it had been the better part of a couple of weeks in Madison. So,
Were you able to work out during the games at all, or were there just too many pieces going on to even get a workout in?
it's funny. I always say that the only time I don't work out all year is when I work a CrossFit event. And it's its own workout, it's its own challenge. But we all go into the day saying, oh yeah, when I get done tonight, I'm going to work out. And then when you finally leave the compound at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, the last thing you're going to do is work out. So yeah, I think it probably the longest I've gone without a workout in 10 years was this past games in Madison.
How long have you and your team been working at the games?
I directed my first games in 2011.
Wow.
And so the team was 250 people strong this year. And of that group, I bet you at least half have done 7 or more games. We have,
Wow.
yeah, we have people on the crew that have been with me since 2011. A lot of people have been there since 2012. Well, one of the exercises that we always do, we have our big team gathering Tuesday morning in the broadcast compound, and I always ask, how many people have done 5 games, 6 games, and when
Yeah.
when you ask about 10 games, a lot of hands go up. We've got veterans. We call it broadcast summer camp. It's the kind of thing people come back every year, and it's their hardest week of the year, and it's their most challenging week of the year, and it's their most enjoyable week of the year.
When you look at doing the games for that long, there have been so many changes from locations to the increase in fitness and more spectators. From a broadcast perspective, how have you and your team had to change on the fly and develop over the years as we, get into more game seasons?
Yeah, we've learned so much from every year, and I think what's been really enjoyable about this journey sort of is CrossFit, the sport has grown. We have grown as broadcasters, and we've really grown together. Um, CrossFit understands more now about how to do things that work for broadcast. We understand so much more about the sport. Um, and so things have changed over the years, and things will always change. And that's the incredible challenge of doing CrossFit events, and especially games, that we talk about inside the rectangle, right? So in Madison, that's North Park and the Coliseum, right?
Mhm.
Anything that happens in North Park or in the Coliseum is, I don't want to say simple, but it's our most basic coverage because we know where the cameras go, we know where the athletes go. It's all happening in one space. But that's never going to be what you deal with at a CrossFit event or certainly at games, right? So the challenge comes with, where else are they going to be? And it dawned on me this year, we've probably covered every inch of the campus in Madison. Like there's probably not an
Wow.
inch of that campus that some event has not gone through that we've had to cover it. And so it's really interesting because the longer we do it, and whatever they throw at us as broadcasters, we feel like we can handle it. We'll figure it out. And I think that's freeing to a point to Dave Castro and now Adrian Bosman, where whatever they come up with, we'll cover it. We'll find a way to get it home, and hopefully get it home well. And so I'd like to think that, nothing's off the table for them, because the test of fitness is the most important thing. It's the center of the target, and that we'll hold up our end and be able to cover whatever that is.
Okay, so as I'm thinking about all of this, the different elements that need to come together to really make a broadcast successful, the first thing that comes to my mind is that capital event. The athletes, they don't have much notice about any of these workouts. It's keeping the programming under lock and key. But I imagine that the broadcast team needs to have somewhat of a heads up to plan how many cameras you want to have, how many uh bodies do we need to pull this off. So when did those conversations begin? And then how do you, as their leader, make it happen?
So we're really, really lucky in that we have developed a trust with CrossFit over the years. And we're a part of that circle of trust. And that's a real honor. And it's not something we take lightly. It's something we talk about with our crew every day. Like, do not be the one who blows this, right? You're going to get information that's confidential. You're going to get information that the athletes don't know yet. Our rule of thumb is, until an event is over, nobody knew what was going to happen. And that's sort of
Mhm.
how we approach it all. But for the Capitol event, we had meetings in Madison at the end of April, and Boz mentioned it. He brought it up. He said, "We're going to do something around the Capitol." And at that point, he wasn't sure, would they run from campus to the Capitol? Would they do something and run back? But we were then, aware, okay, we've got this 3.5 mile stretch we have to cover. Um, so that begins the process, right, mentally. And that's when I come home, and I start hitting whiteboards, right? And just start drawing up different ways of covering the event. Then we were back in Madison in June, and we got a chance to go to the Capitol, and Boz had really kind of dialed in. He was probably at 85 or 90% of what the event was. And so we start that, like you said, you start thinking about, okay, how many cameras, how many people, you know, if we're going to start in North Park and we're going to end at the Capitol, we want to have a reporter in North Park. We want to have a reporter at the Capitol, right? So now you start thinking, so all those dominoes start to fall. The Capitol event was made more interesting by the fact that they decided, that they needed an extra mile. The run wasn't long enough, so they added the bike loop, except that they ran that loop the opposite way of the way they had ridden the bikes. So we had cameras out there that we weren't planning on using for this event. Now we had to move those cameras, and then we had to man those cameras, and again, the dominoes start to fall. So now you've got that going on, but you've also got age group and adaptive events going on in the Coliseum. So you still have to man all that equipment. So what do you do with a finite group of people and a finite amount of gear to cover all these things? So I think I ran out of whiteboards. I actually had to borrow whiteboards to just keep drawing it up so I could look at all the iterations and sort of say, okay, what works here, what can, we always start with plan A, and I think with the Capitol we got to plan G.
Wow.
But because you're doing it from memory, and you're doing it on whiteboards, and then you get there. And so the first thing I did was get in a golf cart and ride everything I knew, and then walk where I couldn't ride, and then go downtown and walk that. And okay, so do my camera positions make sense? Is there room at the finish line? We had a big jib camera at the finish line. Okay, is there room
Mhm.
there? So that's, and I think so many people pull on the same rope to make this happen, right? So it's Boz's idea, and in my mind, when he told me about it, it was his Picasso, and I said, we have to do right by this. Like, this is a really, really big deal. It's a really special event, so we got to get it right. And then, you've got people dealing with the city. Caitlin Arubin and Danny Rogers from Framework are dealing with the city, and what are the rules, and where can we be, and where can't we be, and where can we have vehicles, and where can't we have vehicles, and um, you know, Johnny Mack, who's been with CrossFit forever, he's involved in making sure that nothing we're doing will interfere with the event. That's the last thing we ever want to do, is interfere with an event, interfere with an athlete, interfere with the judge. So we're going through all that. Justin Berg is at the helm of all of this for CrossFit, and he's actually the one who came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to add a mile, right?" But they got ahead of it. I knew 5 days in advance, which is lifetimes for us. And and that event, like it took 32 cameras, 2 drones, a camera in a cart, a camera in a car. We actually switched from standard cabled cameras to radio frequency cameras to what's called bonded cellular cameras that literally work on cell towers.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
the technology in it is mind-boggling, and it's interesting because there's a moment where Rebecca Fuselier is coming up the stairs, and we're on a camera, and it pixelates a little bit, and then it goes back to
Yep.
normal. And in that
Oh, yeah.
moment, everybody went on Instagram Live. All the fans, and the bandwidth did this,
Yeah. Oh, I
and
wasn't even thinking of that.
then you're just praying, sitting in a truck 3 miles away, praying that that camera doesn't go black, right? Like, so it's plans, and even in real time, there's a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C at all times for an event like that. Because what if it's windy and we can't get the drones in the air,
Hmm.
right? What do we do then? What if the cart with the camera dies? Like, you have to take all of that into account to cover an event like that, right? And so many people on our end, we again just blessed by our crew, and that they care as much as they do, and that they're adaptable, and they're willing to evolve as the events change, and nobody complains, and nobody says, "Oh, that's ridiculous." It doesn't matter, right? Like we say all the time, the event's going to be what the event is, and our job is to figure it out. And that was, I mean, I've done a lot of really, really cool events with CrossFit, but that was a really special event, even on its own. And then the way it ended, I told Boz, I said, it's the perfect CrossFit event. No one will ever remember who won, but everybody will remember who finished last.
100%. I mean, when you ask people what the coolest moment of the games was, most people will say that moment, as the crowd kind of helped lead her up the steps and were cheering her on, and to be able to capture that on the live stream, I think it just, that is what TV magic is. Were there any moments during that event that you thought, what happens if, like, the shot goes down? What is the plan B? Like, who do we pan the camera to? What were the backup plans?
Constantly, like, it's so stressful because there aren't a lot of options in certain places. And there was actually a moment where in the second heat, men's leaders come through and they pick up the jerry cans, and they're running toward the Capitol, and then they make this left turn, and they head away from the Capitol, and there's a camera waiting for them, and it's the only camera that can see them as they make that turn, and that camera went black as soon as that happened.
Of
So
course.
I'm talking to the camera guy, and he's kind of moving, tails away with the men's leaders, and I, out of the corner of my eye, I see Haley Adams, and I'm like, make a nice easy move back and just pick up Haley. And the producer Timmy Paps jumps in the announcer's ears and said, "We're going back to Haley now." And oh, there's the female leader. Look, there's Haley, right? And like it was planned, and then we take her, and then by now the men have moved down to where the Husafell Stone is, and I've got a camera there, and that camera at the Husafell Stone pickup was in a car that took them up Wilson and Hamilton Avenues toward the Capitol, stopped at a light. Camera guy had to jump out with his camera, run 2.5 blocks, and be there by the time the athletes got there. And he is a superstar for pulling that off. They sent me video of what it looked like. It's unbelievable, this dude. But those are the people we have. The people we have on our crew will do whatever it takes. And I think that's what I was proudest of with that event. That, and I was just amazed that the plan actually worked.
So is that like the one memory or thought about the CrossFit Games that you had a plan in mind and you feel like the team overall really nailed it? Or is there another moment that you feel like somehow all of the production stars aligned?
I feel like that event is the one people are always going to remember. And for us, things did come together as they were supposed to. And I thought the sandbag event, and I'll be completely honest, when Boz told us about the sandbag event, my first thought was it's not relatable to people who work out in a gym, right? Like
Yeah.
barbells, mostly barbells, right? I was completely wrong. It ended up
Same.
being an
It was so
unbelievable
cool.
event. And there's a shot from that event. One of our camera guys, Matt Hoffman, who has been with us forever and ever, and just gets it on a level like, again, we're lucky, like our guys get it. And we all have a relationship where I want them to sell me shots. Like I'll tell them what I want, generally speaking, like this is our coverage plan. Then they have absolutely every right to figure out what looks, they're the guys down there, right? And Matt sold us this shot, and it would have been profile, but for whatever reason, Danny Spiegel turned toward him, and
Hmm.
she's in perfect focus in the foreground, and all you see slightly out of focus in the background is the crowd losing their minds.
Oh,
And
I
I
just got
think about that.
chills.
I think about that shot, and I think like that's the kind of stuff that makes us great. And it's an us. If we're great, it has nothing to do with any one person. Like we are set up for success from our runners to our announcers and everybody in between. Everybody pulls on that same rope.
Did you and the rest of the team know about the 350-pound bag?
I know Rogue well enough to know they're always prepared. Like there was no way that Katie and Bill weren't going to be prepared. And so I said
Yeah.
in the truck, I said, there's another bag coming out. For sure, there's another bag coming out. And sure enough, I would have liked Katie to have walked out and written 350 in Sharpie on the red tape.
Okay, yeah. What was
I
up with
thought
the
that,
tape?
well, the bag said 340 and they put 10 extra pounds in it. They
Oh, so
didn't
they were
have a
back
bag
there
with
and they
10
actually
extra.
filled. Wow, that's cool.
Because you're not ever going to get anything by road. Like they saw it coming and they were ready for it when it happened. That was a pretty cool moment too, right? And Brent
Yeah.
almost got it. Like if Fikowski had gotten that, the roof would have caved in.
Nobody would have known what to do.
No, I mean, it was loud in there. And I'm not in there, right? I'm hearing it through microphones but it, it, it wasn't quite the tennis stadium on a Saturday night, but I don't think anything ever will be. But
Yeah.
the Coliseum, when it's lit up like that, when the competition is like that, man, that the place literally shakes.
So when you compare it to the tennis stadium, how would you say that like it moving to Madison and like the vibe of the Coliseum in North Park, how have they compared over like the last couple of years?
It's such an undertaking for CrossFit, right? Because when we were in LA, you had a tennis stadium, you had a soccer stadium, you had a track stadium. All the infrastructure was there. Imagine what goes into building the North Park Stadium every year and then taking it down as soon as we're done.
Yeah.
Like so many people work so hard to get all that put together. And then the Coliseum, I remember my first visit to the Coliseum, December 1st, 2016. We knew we were moving to Madison, and I went, and it was the first time I saw the dog park. It was just a big, empty, snowy expanse. And somebody said, "Okay, Dave wants to do an event here. Where do you want to put cameras?" I was like, "Well, we'll figure it out, right?" But we walked in the Coliseum, and the Coliseum, is an old hockey rink, and I'm a hockey guy.
Yeah.
I played hockey, I coached hockey, I direct a lot of hockey. I love rinks, so I felt at home. I walked in, but the lighting in there was 100 years old. It was just, I mean, there were spots where you'd see somebody clearly, and they'd take one step to their left and they disappear. It was
Ooh.
it was just lit like that, and the first time I looked at that, I thought, how is this gonna in any way replicate the tennis stadium? And then CrossFit put the investment in to relight that place, put new lights in it. Chris Cummings and his job and his team, his job is to make it look great, signage, and
Mm.
you see that place now, and it's amazing what it looks like. And the move was hard because LA had become plug and play for us. We knew every inch of campus. We knew how to cover things. We knew what plugged into what where. We knew all the people that ran the building. But like everything else, it was an incredible challenge for everybody to move to Madison. And Madison has got this incredible festival of fitness feel that it's a really neat city. I think it's the perfect size city for us. You land at the airport, you see a giant poster of Tia and a giant
Yeah.
poster of Justin, and you're like, oh, the CrossFit Games here. And in LA, because of how big it is, because of what's going on, you never really had that feel. So Madison's been an incredible host. But yeah, there were a lot of challenges, and um, year one in Madison was 2017, and we were really we were impressed with ourselves as a group. Like everybody, we kind of walked away and said, wow, we got most of that right. Like that, you don't know for sure till you open the gates and you see it. But I think we got most of it right. And we feel like that every year. Like we don't get it all right. We're still desperate to get better. I think every department is that way. Broadcast is no different. Like
Hmm.
we leave and it takes a while. Like it took me a full week to be able to see the victories, because all you're thinking about is, okay, here are the things that didn't go as well as they could have. How do we make them better? And you train your weaknesses, right? So it's the same thing. And then after a week, I kind of settled in and started watching more of the stuff, and I thought, wow, this stuff looks pretty good. Like we've got a great team. We've got, I mean, again, the announcers are great. The producers and directors are so committed and so good, and all of our technicians up and down the line, and all of our team leads. We've assembled this team of people that care so much. And you do another sport, and I'm lucky. I direct a lot of sports, right? When I direct a football game, there's 11 guys on each team on the field. They were big numbers. I know how many points a touchdown is worth. I know how many points a field goal is worth. Like they're not going to change it in the middle of the game. They're not going to say, "Hey, we're playing with 12 today." Like that doesn't happen. So it's not that those sports are easy to cover, but you walk in with a baseline. And what's really incredible about CrossFit is things change. Things are going to constantly, I tell anybody who's new to the CrossFit Games, the only constant is change. Stuff's going
Yeah.
to change. Being frustrated by it or being bummed out by it or being pissed off by it, like buys you nothing, because it's going to happen. So we always say it's the toughest test of the year for the athletes, and it's by far the toughest test of the year for broadcast, by far.
So thinking about some of these other sports that you broadcast, how does it compare when it comes to planning and making sure that your people, your videographers, your announcers are all prepared? Like, what is the strategy when you were doing a football game versus a CrossFit competition?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because if I'm doing a football game, then a week out, I know who's going to, I know the 11 starters on offense and defense for both teams, right? And we can get on the phone with the coach, and he's going to say, here's our scheme and here's what we're going to do, and watch this kid. And,
Oh, interesting.
where with CrossFit, again, because of unknown and unknowable, and because of the incredible aspect of these athletes, and I don't think we hit this hard enough. These athletes don't know what they're going to do sometimes, and still go out there and do it well. Like that's the part of this that sometimes I think gets lost, is that they're such great athletes that they can find out an hour before, and okay, let's go do that, right? Hey, here's the new handstand push-up standard. All right.
Yeah.
you know they're incredible. But so again, if you're going to cover a football game, you have the information. Where the cameras go. That the field runs this way and it's 100 yards long, and the end zone. You have all the information. Um, with CrossFit, anything inside the rectangle, right? If it's in the Coliseum, if it's in North Park, we have our basic camera set up. And over the years, I've learned, okay, this is the right place to put cameras. So whatever they do, we can cover it, right?
Mm,
And CrossFit, it's become a lot more linear, which is great because when I started 2011, 2012, 2013, you'd have athletes going in four directions at once.
very different.
And it's become so much more broadcast friendly. Now you still have people going in two directions at once, but it's only two directions. Um, and you have a fairly good idea of here's where the start line is and here's where the finish line is. Um, then what CrossFit does for us is, I'm at the reveal, which is usually end of June, where they say, here's the events as they stand today.
Mm,
So, okay, that's different. Last year where they ran out of the Coliseum for the first time and
mhm.
around the back, right? Okay, that had never been done before. So that's great to know. Okay, I've got a plan. And what we do is we have those meetings. The first day, the first thing we do is we get walked through the events. And again, it's a circle of trust. There's not a ton of people in that room. Then I can actually walk the grounds again and say, okay, well, now knowing this, I need a camera here, I need a camera here to cover this, right? And I think we've gotten to the point where we know we need a drone and or two, or do we need a helicopter? And that was, very much like the Capitol event. There was a lot of discussion about, do we go back to a helicopter? That way, if it's windy, we're okay. And we ended up going the drone route. And actually, the guy who ran the drone for the run through the dog park and down John Nolan Drive was on a
Mhm.
boat because it was the only place he could be to move with the athletes and still
Drones,
see his
boats,
drone.
cars,
Oh
on
yeah.
feet, like, there's nothing you guys won't do.
No, I mean whatever it takes. Like we
I love that.
we have a really good relationship with the boat rental folks in Madison because we use a lot of boats over there. But so, having an insight into what those events are and then having access to Boz this year and being able to say, hey man, talk me through, how you see this. Um, and we try to be a resource. Like we don't program,
Mhm.
that's not what we do. But there have been times over the years where I'll get a call and someone will say, well, what would look better or what direction do you
Mm.
want us to face if we, and that's huge. That's huge for us. That sort of communication. We're really, again, lucky to have the relationship we have with CrossFit and have been a part of this for so long. It's all family. And so there is that trust. But so we do that. And then about 2 weeks out, Boz was kind enough this year to jump on a call and he walks our announcers and our production team through each of the events as they
Okay.
stand at that point. And Dave was always honest about this, and Boz was very honest. It's like, this is what it looks like right now. This is going to change, or I'm not sure about this, but just gives us an idea, right? So now you can start to percolate. You can start to think about coverage. You can start to think about what's going to bring this home best, and then you start drawing maps. And everybody laughs at my maps because I'm old school and I literally print out the floor and then I draw on it with a pen and I take that to my camera guys and I'm like, here's, but you start to, you start to draw maps and, for me as a director, I'll literally look at the floor, close my eyes and see the event and then say, okay, if this is what the event looks like, how do we best cover it? And it changes for every event. That's the other thing. It's super interesting. If you're covering a hockey game and you've got a guy with a camera on his shoulder in the corner, his assignments are his assignments. Like
Yeah.
it's not going to change. But you know, um, the sprint event is a great example of you can't have all your handheld guys up at the point where they're lifting because then you have nobody to see them when they make the turn on the run. So how do you split those cameras up so you can cover both ends of an event like that? Um, and so you're constantly being challenged, and that's made me a better director in every sport I do. And I can walk into an empty room and look at it and see camera positions. So.
When we're thinking about the camera positions, a common complaint that some viewers have each year is CrossFit's live stream doesn't show the full floor. Kind of talk about why the broadcast team decides to focus in on some of the leaders or maybe the fan favorites rather than maybe doing like a split screen where you see the whole floor and a close up of some of the leaders at the time?
It's interesting, right? Because it's a conversation we have all the time. Someone actually sent me a text that said we should have 40 drones, and each drone should just focus on one athlete, and then people at home could switch to whichever athlete they wanted. And I honestly see this incredible. I would need a 41st drone to shoot the 40 drones, shooting all the athletes. I
I
don't
know
know
I'm
how.
thinking of what that would look like and like the
I,
airspace and the traffic and how that would
yeah,
all work.
I don't know if the FAA would go for that, but and I think it's really important for us to get feedback and to never look at something like, well, that can't be done. It's more get to what is it the viewers want, right? Because our job is
Mhm.
to serve the viewers as well as we serve the athletes and we serve CrossFit, right? We've many masters, and that's how this should be. Um, why we cover the leaders is because by and large, you're covering an event. People want to see who's leading. If you watch a golf tournament, right? Once those leaders go off on the first hole, you're going to see them and anybody else in contention, right?
Mhm.
Unless somebody gets a hole in one or chips in out of the sand, you're not going to see the guy in 38th place because I don't want to say they haven't earned that broadcast time, but the vast majority of the people watching are interested in who's going to win. And we try to take advantage of the longer events. Like Jackie Pro is a good example. You know that they're going to be on the rowers for 3+ minutes. You can go
Mhm.
right down the line and tell stories. Give everybody that coverage because by being at the CrossFit Games, they deserve to be covered. Right?
Sure.
Everybody deserves what time we can give them. But imagine how people at home would feel if we're showing Brooke Wells in 5th place and we don't show Tio Win. So we do use a lot of 2 boxes. We use a lot of split screens. We do try to use those tools to tell the story, but there's also always a danger of trying to do too much and it gets confusing and then people at home don't know what they're looking at. And that's our biggest sin, right? Is going overboard and now what you're looking at is just a mess. Um, but one of the things we did with the Capital event was we added a camera once I got on site and I walked it and I said, we're in a position when they're on that run down John Nolan where all we've got is a drone. So all you're going to see is the leaders. So we added a camera right before the bridge that could literally pick up the second pack and just let all the runners come through.
Hmm.
And so you're always seeing the leaders from above. So if there's a pass for the lead, you don't miss that. But it gave Sean Woodland, who, by the way, I don't know how he
Oh,
does it,
he's so
the
good.
best, but he could identify the athletes as they came by, and he had a little story about. And so we very intentionally said, how do we do this so we're not just living with the leaders?
Hmm.
But in a sporting event, most people want to see who wins, and I think it's our job. We try to show everybody finish. It's an addiction. It's not good. I need to, if I miss the 37th place person crossing the finish line, I kick myself. But a lot of times, in some of these events, it's Tia's just won. We want to celebrate her. We'll go back when the next people finish, right? We'll show them, but really she's the focus at that point, or whoever the focus is at that point. So, but we do, in our hearts, we do truly try to show every finisher. And sometimes that's more difficult than other times.
And I wonder if like that conversation from other people, like whether it's the spectators, because they have somebody from their affiliate who's competing at the games. Of course, they want to see and cheer on that person. But I've also heard like from coaches because they want to see their athlete in the entire workout. But I wonder if it's just like this mindset of, well, it's CrossFit. CrossFit kind of does whatever we want. We're our own sport. Like we aren't on the same playing field as like golf and other things. But I think what you're saying really puts it in line to make it on the same playing field as some of the more well-known professional sports.
If we want to be a real sport, right? That's the term they use. Or,
Yeah.
if we want to be a professional sport, where our athletes, and this is, I think, everybody's goal, where our athletes can make money being professional CrossFitters, where they can afford to do that full time. There are certain things we have to do from our end, you know, and like being on CBS for the last 2 hours on Sunday is huge because it exposes CrossFit to an audience that might not ordinarily see CrossFit. And it's a rare sport that we broadcast where we're changing lives, right? And if you watch a basketball game that I direct, it looks great. It's a basketball game. It's likely not going to make anybody's life better. When you watch CrossFit, there are people every year that watch the CrossFit Games and walk into a local box and say, I want to try that.
Mm.
And that is going to make their life better. We take that part of it very seriously. And so when we're on CBS and we have this 2 hour window to show a group of people who might not have seen CrossFit before CrossFit, that's our chance to really legitimize the sport and really tell the stories of our athletes and show what makes them great and show what makes CrossFit great. And I think that we have to think in terms of how do we help professionalize the sport, because that's the goal. That, I think, is CrossFit's goal. I believe it's the athlete's goal. I think that if you ask most CrossFit athletes, games competitors, do you want to have a second job, and do CrossFit when you can, and squeeze it? Most of them would say no, they would love to make this their full-time job. So we would love to help make that happen. And the way we do that is to treat it as a legitimate sport, which I think it is.
Does working with CBS, does that change like the structure or the game plan at all for your team?
We have a completely separate production team and technical team that handles the CBS show, the wraparound parts of that show.
Mhm.
So the desk parts of the show with Brent Stover and Annie Sakamoto and Tommy Marquez. And then they will toss to our production team that does the competition for the competition. So it becomes an even bigger, more intricate group. And then it's all about the timing having to be perfect to get it to us at the right time so we can set up the event the right way. So it becomes that much more, intricate. But I think that the CBS show is definitely geared toward an audience that hasn't been watching all week. And that's a really heavy lift. Like, how do
Mhm.
we've already had 12 events over 5 days.
How do you
How do
bring people
you
up to
get
speed at that point?
right? And our group does an incredible job. And the pictures are so beautiful. The video they use, and um, and there's Hamilton Road Productions has a documentary team there that's shooting things that everything gets shared, everything is interfaced. And so the, if you watch the CBS show and you had no idea what you were watching, you didn't know what CrossFit was, it's so compelling looking that I think it makes you stick around long enough to see the event. And when you see the
Yeah.
event, now you're blown away because wow, right? Like, how are these people so good at so many things? The athletes, and so yeah, the CBS show is really it's kind of its own baby over here, being dealt with while we're handling competition all week, and then we all get together and get on the same page and figure out the timings, and that's where the producers and the associate directors get all that figured out. I always say I just I make pictures. That's my job. Um, but part of building this team is putting the right people in those positions who get it, right, who understand what we're trying to achieve, who are on the same team, who are part of the same family. um, and Joe Novello, who is our boss at CrossFit, uh, Joe's actually retiring at the end of this year. Joe's been there since 2012. Joe and Justin Berg have a lot of input into the CBS show, because again, this is this 2 hour opportunity for CrossFit, the company, for CrossFit, the sport, for CrossFit, the exercise, right? This is that chance. And then My partner at HRP Live, Charlie Doobie, he's really he's very heavily involved. He produced that show for a lot of years, and he's very heavily involved. So you have a lot of brains on that show, and sometimes that gets hard because there's only so much time.
Yeah.
But they did an amazing job of figuring out what is the best way to sell our sport and sell our athletes, and maybe change some lives.
What are some of the biggest differences that you see when creating a broadcast for CrossFit versus some of these other sports that you do?
Just that things are going to change, and so that's the first part of it. Is everything is a plan, nothing is written in stone. um I mean, look at Sunday, right? Sunday we got rain, and so alpaca changed, and now there's no rope climbs. And I can't tell you how sad I was because we had mounted two robotic cameras in a new place so that we would be able to get
Oh,
this incredible look at these
man.
these L-sit rope climbs. And then
Yeah.
now it's like, oh, those cameras are no good anymore. They're not gonna be able to see anything. But again, like that happens, and that's a great example of communication, right? Because Boz had come
Mhm.
in and he had briefed us on the event. And then he said, we're going to go out and test right now. And we're going to see if the ropes are safe. And if the ropes are not safe, then, safety first. And that's not going to happen. He called me 10 minutes later and said, hey, just wanted you to know we're getting rid of the ropes. Here's the new workout. That kind of communication gives us a chance to succeed, right? There have been times in the past, due to a lack of time, things changing last minute, where we didn't know something had changed until we're covering the event, and we go, oh, guess they're not running there now.
That's new.
Um, right, and you figure it out. I thought that was an amazing moment for me, that Boz picked up the phone and said, "This is what it's going to be," and it gave us the time to prepare and go back to the camera operators and go back to the tape
Mhm.
operators and tell everybody, "All right, change your pace. Don't be looking for rope climbs. We're not going to be there." So it changed where, for me, I changed where the cameras were, where I located our guys on, on handhelds that have cameras on their shoulders. Like, all of that stuff changes, and that trickle down is huge. And when we know, we can do that. So that's one of the things that's different. The other thing that's different is we're a part of the community. And so things mean more emotionally than they might mean in other sports. Now, I've been a hockey player and coach and worked in hockey my whole life, and I've always said it's my emotional tie. I need hockey in my life because it keeps my heart full. But even that, even as a part of that community, it's not the same as CrossFit. And um, I remember Murph, when we did Murph the first year in LA, and I remember telling the crew, because that was a pretty heavy lift for us too, with being in the soccer stadium and then running around the whole
Yeah.
campus. And but I told our crew, I said, understand that this is an honor. This is a privilege to get to bring this to the community. We've all done Murph, right? We all know, like,
Mhm.
this means a lot. And I go back to the Capitol event a lot because it's recent. It just but we have all been that person. I mean, me more than most, right? You're last in a class, you're last in a workout, you're trying to find the energy to finish, and everybody's there for you. And when that happened, you know, for me, I'm looking at it as a director, but I'm also looking at it as a member of the community. Like, this means so much. In that moment, this is really important, and we have to get it right. We have to get it right, not for ourselves, but for the community that we're a part of. And so I think that's a big difference as well. Is just our whole group is a part of this community, and so that's why you put in the 18-hour days and the 19-hour days, because it matters what goes home. It's not that it ever doesn't matter, but it just
Mhm.
matters different.
This was your 11th CrossFit game.
Yes.
Okay, I know that we're like fresh off of it still, but what can people expect for next year? Have you already gotten your wheels turning on some new implements or ways to make it even better?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I If we had unlimited funds, it'd be crazy the things we could add. We definitely, look, we've talked about a lot of things, and a lot goes into this, right? And certainly budget has a lot to do with it. What the events are, but we've certainly talked about, we had a spider cam in Los Angeles, which was a camera on cables that could drop all the way down to the floor, and we had it in the tennis stadium all those years, and we'd love to bring back some sort of cable cam, and I don't know if it will happen, but we've got some definitive ideas about that. We've been playing a lot with these depth of field cameras that you see on Fox Football and CBS Football now. I use them a lot when I direct music. I trying to just figure out the right way, to use that. And then it just comes down to, some of it is the events, right? Okay, if we're in the water, all right, what can we do? If we're in a pool, what can we do? One of the things I would have liked to have had this year is an underwater camera for the rinse and repeat event.
Cool.
you
Yeah.
know, and that just wasn't in the cards this year. But I have a file on my computer called CrossFit Toys. And whenever I come
Oh,
across
I wonder what's
something,
in there.
I stick it in the file. And then, as we start to plan, and it's like I open the file and it's
Cool.
like, all right, well, what in here might make sense? And we've done a lot of things. We've been really, again, lucky because we've been able to meet those challenges that CrossFit gives us and say, oh, well, what would be cool to make that work? It would really be neat. What's a different perspective? When we had the obstacle course the first year, so we had the obstacle course, and we actually had a camera on a little radio controlled truck that ran next to the obstacle course. So you were down low, ground level, looking up, and it was absolutely spectacular, like spectacular.
Oh, neat.
And it worked in the Coliseum as well, and it worked for some other events, but it worked best. Yeah, it worked for the clean ladder in the Coliseum because it could run right
Mm.
next to them. But it worked best for the obstacle course. So the question is that a tool that would work for us every year? Probably not, right? So we have to start to get an idea of what the events are, and then say, all right, they're in the lake, they're in a pool, they're in the ocean. What do we need to make that work? The first year, my first games, 2011. The week before, Tony Budding, who was my first boss at CrossFit and is a visionary and really, really helped push CrossFit forward from the early days. But Tony said, hey, we're going to do this event at Hermosa Beach, and they're going to do some stuff on the sand. They're going to run in the water. They're going to swim around the pier. And I said, all right, well, how are we going to cover this? And he said, oh, just so you know, you can't have any cameras on the pier. I said, oh, perfect. Okay. So how are we going to cover this? So I said,
Great.
what we need? I said, we need a helicopter. And he said, okay, right, get a helicopter. And I
Casual.
remember a couple of days before the event, I said, it was the day before. I said, can you get me the number of the camera guy that's going to be in the helicopter? I want to call him and have a conversation. He said, what camera guy? I said, well, camera guy in the helicopter to shoot him when they're swimming. He's like, oh no, we got a helicopter because you have to go right from there back to StubHub to direct a team event. I said, wait, you got me a helicopter?
Oh my
He was
gosh.
like, yeah, you said you needed a helicopter. And I said, oh wow, talk about, I missed the boat. I should have explained that better.
So now you're
But
the camera operator.
well, I'm just, but they did. I'll never forget my first CrossFit Games. I had no idea what CrossFit was. Literally no idea. People are
Wow.
talking a different language.
Yeah.
Um, I am desperate to find someone who can translate, so I have some idea what I'm covering. And that was the first year, so it would be an hour before the event, and they would say, "Okay, here's what we're doing." Oh, okay. What are thrusters? Right? Can you show me how that works? Um, and I was lucky enough to have someone who would draw stick figures for me. And he was like, this is what this looks like, and this is what
Oh,
the
that's
chest bar
amazing.
looks like. And I like literally it was like, all right, let's figure this out as we go. And but one of the things that CrossFit was great about was we'll put cameras wherever you think you might need them. let's figure it out together. Like, let's not put ourselves behind the eight ball. And we were able to, learn a lot. And back then, like we talked about, people going in four directions, so cameras at all four, ends in case they go this way or that way. And really like learning that way instead of always feeling behind helped us advance what we do a long way. And now we're able to make really good decisions because we understand a lot better and we know what worked and what didn't work. And it's we had a chance to make mistakes as well and learn from them, and that's really important and that's rare. When you're covering a sport that's been around for 100 years, you're supposed to know how to cover it. It was like, all right, well, we'll all figure it out together. So I think that was, that helped us all advance together, which has been great.
Well, what you guys do is incredible. It's fun to see the progression from, the first year of covering the CrossFit Games up until now. And I just appreciate you sitting down with us today to kind of give us an inside look of what it was like covering the games. And yeah, I'm glad you went into the Capitol because just seeing that come to life was so cool.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the time. And again, like none of it happens because of me. It happens because of hundreds of people pulling on the same rope and a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of whiteboards and a lot of uh, it really it takes so many people and the vast majority of them are unsung, and I just think it's important that people know that. But it's a true privilege to be a part of all of it, and it's something I hope I get to do for a really long time.
Well, we appreciate you and your team bringing it to life, and we cannot wait to see what you guys have in store for next year.
All right, well, thanks so much, Lauren.